welcome to Word Art, brought to you by the Winfield Public Library. My name is Miss Choate, and you might have seen me in some videos on my own channel, Marisa Choate, also known as Art with Miss Choate, where I was posting videos every day, and now I'm going down to Tuesday and Thursday where I pair my videos with Miss Nucha, who, as you guys know, is the children's librarian and does the story times on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So today it's a very special class. We're doing word art. So I hope you guys prepared and thought about ahead of time what's a really meaningful quote to you, or your mantra, or like what gets you through, what's something that you'd love to put up on your wall and reread. And so that's what we're going to be working on today. I'm going to show you a couple different like calligraphy styles, different fonts that you can try by hand, and we're going to start by doing our background image. So grab some paint, grab some markers, whatever supplies you have around is going to work. We're just going to be layering and collaging anything you have. So we're going to start with doing our background image, and then we're going to do our lettering on top. We're going to do some practicing of our lettering first. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to think about our background image. I'm going to start with some watercolors. If you don't have watercolors, you can use markers, colored pencils, crayons, and you want to have your background fit with your quote or your word. So if your quote is happy and bright, then maybe we stick with some happy and bright colors. Maybe there's some darkness here, but it's going to bright. I want you to really think thoughtfully about how your colors match or go with or flow with your words or your concept. All art should have some kind of meaning, and it should say something. And obviously our word art will physically say something. So I'm just going to be putting some bright colors, some reds, yellows, oranges. And I'm not going to go to the edge of my paper. I'm going to leave it kind of soft. Now I'm just doing this in my sketchbook. You can do this on any kind of paper. If you have watercolor paper, that's fantastic. I've been doing so much art during quarantine that I don't have any watercolor paper left. And feel free to move it with your hands. Don't be afraid of playing, experimenting, seeing what can you really do with these colors. I'm going to show you a few different ways, a few different styles. So this is just going to be my first way where I'm just putting some color down on the paper. I'm keeping a very close-knit color family, so yellow, red. So yellow and red make orange. So those are the three colors that I'm using. I'm just blending together so I don't have to worry about them going muddy on me. I'm not putting any green in. If I put green, then I'm going to start to get some mud looking colors in there. So I'm just using my hand. I'm moving these colors around. I'm going to do a little bit more dark red down here. Maybe you can see like what happens if you take a Q-tip and you start moving the color around with something else, or take another brush. Play, because you want your background to be interesting but not overpowering when we're putting our words on top. And the more you put your colors on top of each other, the more interesting they're going to be, the richer, the deeper they're going to seem. So like down here, the colors are getting much deeper. Maybe I can leave some texture. And don't worry if your paper is starting to get a little wrinkly. If you put pressure on top of it, it'll smooth out again. So I'm not worrying about these wrinkles because I'll just put my sketchbook top back on top of it and even put a book on top, and it'll go smooth again. I don't like that spot showing. Smooth that out. So here's my first page that's ready for a word or a phrase or a mantra. Well, let's go on to another technique. Now, if you were thinking, I don't have paints, well, if you have washable markers, we can do a very similar technique. So you're going to be putting those markers down on the page, and then you're going to be hitting it with some water. Now, you might need to play with this a little bit. Oh, my brush still had some color from the last one. You might need to make it wet and then put your color down. You'll have to play with this. I'm going to just put some water down on my page. And it depends on how fresh your washable markers are. So if I do that, now I go on top again. Now it's moving around pretty good. So you need to play. Sometimes I forget. I've done this before, but I forget. So I'm sticking with the same color, different color family than before. Oh, you can see right there where there was a lot of water. It's really moving around for me. So I'm going to do yellow and blue makes green. So those are the colors I'm sticking with for this one. Speaking of blue, let's get some blue in there. Now, you can do this. You don't have to just completely go abstract like I'm doing. If you wanted to have more of a scene, you want it to look like a landscape, you could do that. Personally, I just love abstract art. Now, you might want to consider putting a page underneath, or maybe we'll be happily surprised, pleasantly surprised with what's underneath after we're done with this one. And remember, your paper also affects how it's going to turn out. How fresh your markers are. I know I said that already, but you can see that lime green wasn't really working because it's pretty close to being completely out. So play with the supplies that you have at home. I'm going to set this one to the side and see, actually, I kind of enjoy what's going on here more than what's going on here. So sometimes your accidents turn into quite happy little mistakes, and learn to embrace them. So I kind of want more. So maybe I'll add, maybe if I rub it, I can get more to come through. Maybe if I put more water down, let's see. Yeah, I got some more to come through there. Let's do it a little bit more. Try to not get upset. Like when a mistake happens, try to let it influence you. Learn from it. Whether it's positive or negative that you're learning from it. I always tell my students, well, what did you learn? It's okay if it's a bad thing. You learned that you hate this lime green color. That's okay. Just as long as you're learning from it, even if it was a mistake, something happened wrong, but I'm loving this. So I'm gonna leave that alone now and let that dry. I'm gonna show you one more technique for an underpainting. Now, you could add this technique. We're gonna be doing collage. You could put it on top of something like this where maybe you're not terribly fond of it and it might make you like it more, or you can do it on this whole new page or maybe onto one of these that doesn't have a whole lot going on. For this next style, collaging, I'm gonna choose this one because there's some white space going on and I want to fill it up a little bit more. And you can take scraps of anything in your house, some scrap tissue paper, maybe even some old art that you're not a fan of anymore. Maybe it's a piece of scrap paper that you would use in the printer, or even a piece of art that you really do like that you think, oh, maybe this element could be cut out right here and added into this. Anything can work. So just look around your house. A magazine would work. I can't find a magazine, so I'm just gonna be using what I can find. Now you can cut or you can rip these pieces apart. Now remember, it just depends on the style, the words that you're gonna choose to go on top. What kind of feeling do you want for this? Now with tissue paper, you could also play with what happens when you get it wet and lay it on top. The water will act like a glue, or you could actually use a glue. I'm just gonna start layering my tissue with some water, considering we already have the watercolor on here and we can see what happens. And I like how it folds up, how we can see through. So let's see what happens even when I put it on top of one of our sections. So I'm enjoying how this is looking. I'm going to keep going with this. Now if you had other colors, I only found red, but you can use tons of other colors. This is wonderful to do with tissue paper. I reuse my tissue paper over and over, but eventually it gets a little holes or whatever, and you can't put it into a gift bag anymore. And this is a great thing to do when you get to that point. I'm just putting my shapes around. Try overlapping them. Try even doing some crumbled bits. Maybe I do a very crumbled. Now remember, we still need our words on top of here. So I want to make sure I have space. Maybe I could have them curve around this. Maybe one more piece of tissue paper, and then I'm going to call it on the tissue paper front, and maybe see what else I can collage in here. Maybe, I know I said that was my last one, but I am liking how this is looking. And everyone's is going to be so different. That's the wonderful thing about this. I might be telling you a new technique you've never tried, but yours will end up looking completely different. And it can't. You can't actually make it look like mine unless you have exactly the same materials as me. So I'm going to take this piece of art that I wasn't a fan of anymore, and I'm going to try cutting it out and collaging this in. And I'm kind of just following the natural shape that was already in. So maybe now I realize this piece shouldn't be there. I'm going to put this right here. And play with overlapping. Overlapping means this piece is going on top of this piece. Don't be afraid to overlap. That's what really makes a piece look interesting. Now I'm just using a regular glue stick. And I'm filling into the corner. I really like that straight edge, this 90-degree angle that I got. Now sometimes you might need to wait for things to dry to be able to continue. Remember we talked about overlapping, so maybe I put this one on top. And luckily I just used water so I can peel it up. I'm gonna put some glue down here. Remember, I already have, this is my third one, so if I don't like how this one ends up, that's okay, because I did a bunch. I like to make a bunch of things at once and see how they all kind of play out. And I think I'm going to save this one to do my word art on top. If you like the way this image came out, this was done with food color and oil, and that was done in a video a couple weeks back. I can put the link in the description below if you like this technique as your background. What you do is you take a tray, you put some water, you put your oil spray on top of the pan, and then you mix in your food coloring. And I think it comes out quite beautiful. But that's a whole nother technique, but you can learn about that on my page. So we'll go back to here, and we can keep collaging things in. I kind of even really like this edge of my sketchbook paper. I think that's interesting. Now, sometimes you might need to wait for things to dry. I know some of it's not really sticking the best, but that's okay. I don't mind it popping off the page. So now that we're done with, I'm going to call that done. I don't know. Yours might come out completely different. I'm going to put some images of different collage ideas. That way you see this is one idea with some leftover tissue paper and old art. But what else can you do? I'll drop some images right here. And then we also have these. So we have our watercolor with washable markers. And you're going to need to let that dry before we go our calligraphy on top. And then we have our watercolor just with our, you know, cheap little pads here. So you can play around different background images. You might be like me and already have one that would be a beautiful base for some calligraphy. So now we're going to go into practicing our calligraphy. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about our supplies for our calligraphy. You can do it in pen, pencil, marker. Honestly, each supply acts different. I like to do mine in just a felt tip little marker, and then I go back through and I make it thicker. Now you could do it with a washable marker right away. I'll show you the differences. But for getting started, I would just use either a pencil or a pen so you have a lot of control over it, something that you're really comfortable with. And we're going to talk about up and down. When do we have a thick line? When do we have a thin line? So anytime, let's start with the letter A. If we're going up, then down, identify we went up, then down. So down is thick. Up is thin. So we go up, and now we come down, and we can just add another line to that. So there's an A. So let's do a B. And I'm just going to do capital letters here. So I went down for the B, then it was across, so that's skinny, kind of going down there, going down again. So we're going to do thick, partial thick, partial. So you see here we have thin, 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 and right here on the humps and the down we have thick. So if we go to the letter C, so some of these are going to be a little more complicated when they're not just straight lines. Anytime you're having that downward motion, you're going to have thick. So here we have a down, so we're going to make that thick. And here we have thin. So let's go to D, down. And this is similar to the B. So here we're thick. Here we're thin, slightly thick, back to thin. E, down, across our thin lines. Now you could have fun with those so they're not as boring. That's when you can start to play with your own style. F, down. So that would be thick. G is going to be similar to the C. So it's going to be thick in here, thin everywhere else. Our H will be thick. Now I'm going to switch supplies. So we still have this idea of up and down. Up is thin, sideways are thin, down is thick. Now I'll show you with a normal washable marker. The nice thing is you can play with how you hold your pen. So if you hold it more to the side, you automatically get that thick line for the I. Across is thin. Now J, we're going to go thick to thin. Do you see how it did it automatically? Because I'm holding it to the side and letting that brush stroke do it for me. K, when I went down, it was thick. Up, I went on to the point. And for the downwards part of the K, I let my hand fall down. L comes naturally. Now I did mess up my M a little bit because I did come downwards on that part, so that should have been thick and that should have been thin. But even I make mistakes as I'm going, but you can see how that kind of sticks out a little bit. It's a little weird, that one. And you might not realize why until you think about the up, down. So that was down, it should have been thick. This was up, it should have been thin, back down for thick. So let's try it with the N. Down, thick. There's our N. O, And you see how it does that natural curve for us there? That could have been thinner. I should have lifted up again, so let's try that again. There we go. Much better. So now let's try not just block thick letters, let's try another style. So now we're gonna do some more basic calligraphy that you see kind of all around the internet. So we're gonna try the letters first. So we're gonna go A, and do you remember about thick and thin? And you can kind of give it your own flow. So remember down, thick, and this is where I'm saying you can give it your own flow. You can make it to like the bottoms, because I was kind of going that downward motion for a little bit right there. Now we'll do a lowercase. And I'm just going back through and making the downward motions thicker. And you can even try doing this with a brush. The C's are very similar. So the last thing I want to talk about is a baseline. So that's like your line on your paper if you're doing this online paper. This is where most of your letters are going to sit. You can mark it with a ruler if you don't have a ruler. I just used a box. And you can mark it in pencil so it can be erased later. I put it in a colored pencil so you can see it really nice. I'm going to do a practice of our word first. That's going to go on that first watercolor page we did. And I'm using the word inspire. So when we have our baseline, we're going to want some of our letters to drop below the baseline to give it that kind of fun feel that a lot of calligraphy nowadays has. So in old school, all of it would be really on that line. Right now we're going to drop like our N's, our S's, our R's. We're going to drop those letters below the baseline. So I'm going to start with that I, going up to the N. Now the N, we're going to have fun. So the top of the N is going to go pretty high, drop pretty low, coming up to that S, curve up. Now I'm actually going to break my calligraphy. You know, normal calligraphy, a normal cursive, it all stays together. But in this, we're going to break it. And we're also trying to keep our tops kind of even to a degree. So my S goes high, my P will stay kind of high, come down, curve a little bit. Now the top of my P will start lower, curve back to the I. Now my R will go big, bottom of R drop down to my E. And there's my inspire. I can put my dots, and now I can go through and do my thicker lines. So remember, downward motions are thicker. And since I wrote this word pretty big, I'm actually drawing in my second line and filling it in. So this part of the N is thicker. Depends on what kind of pen or marker you're using. You may not have to go back, but I don't mind having this control over my calligraphy. So now we'll go to the P. This one down is thick. And you know, you can start making your own if you want to curve this a little bit more. Maybe you want it really thick at the top, thinner at the bottom. This is why I enjoy doing it with this kind of pen, because I really get a lot of control over it. Going to my eye. And when you're done, I like to take a step back from it, make sure, does it look even? Can I fix any of it? This is also why we practice. Now with this kind of calligraphy, you have more freedom. You know, do you want to go back over those thin lines one more time to give it a little bit more volume? This is up to you. There's no right and wrong with this kind of calligraphy. So I'm quite happy. Maybe my dots could be a little bit bigger. Take a step back from it, look at it. You could erase that bottom line. Now we're ready to go on and do it one more time on our final paper. Remember, you didn't have to do the word inspire. It could be any word you wanted, or phrase, or saying. So here we have that first watercolor painting. I could go ahead and do my baseline and draw it, but you might not need to. You might be able to do it without. I'm gonna do the same word that I practiced. We're gonna go to inspire, and I'm not gonna draw that baseline, because remember, you could also decide to curve it, and we'll do the next one, we'll do a phrase in case that's what you wanted to do. So going to the I, to the N, lifting up, going high, coming down low. Now sometimes I need to take a break, so we're gonna put right back in the same spot, coming to the S, lifting up, going to the P, going to the I. Remember, the R is going to be big. Going to the E. Now I can go through and do my thick lines. Anywhere going down will be thick. And I did like how it came out on the P on the practice page where I did it bigger at the top. I liked that, so I'm doing that again. Now I'm going to go through and just give some of those thin lines one quick coat. I can make them a little bit thicker because this is such a big word. I drew it so large that I think it wants a little bit more heft, just like I did it before. And now I'm pretty happy with how that looks. So on this one, I'm gonna look for a phrase to put in there. And we're gonna actually mix some of the types of calligraphy or types of fonts together on this one. Now the last one I'm going to do is going to be a quote where I'm going to mix my fonts, and it's one of my favorite quotes by Michelle Obama. No, not ever let anyone make you feel like you don't matter. So we're going to do a couple different types of fonts. And actually, I'm going to turn my sketchbook this way. And remember, if you need to do this in pencil first, kind of track out where you're putting it, that's totally fine. So I'm going to start my quote up here. I'm going to kind of make it centered. And we're going to start with a very thin calligraphy. And I can either do my whole thing or go back right away and make some of these lines thicker. Now I am realizing I did not practice this first. So if it comes out good or it doesn't, then maybe I just have to redo the whole thing, and that's okay. And I'm also doing it up on top, like if this is in my sketchbook, so it makes it a little bit harder because my hand doesn't have anything to rest on, so do think about that. You might find that you have your own challenges depending on what source you're drawing on and whatnot. Now I'm going to switch up my font, and I'm going to go back to the thick lettering that I showed you at first. I'm still thinking about movements coming down are thicker. And so think about like powerful words you might want to put in a font like this, and you could even go in once you're done or as you go, you can decorate. So maybe there be straight lines next to the downward movements in like a gel pen of a color that makes sense. You can go through and kind of add those things. And I'll go back to the thin line. Now maybe you find out that you actually even need a thinner tip than you're using. Depends how long your quote is. This is where I'm having a hard time right here at the edge because I am doing it in the sketchbook. And you could decide to leave that alone. Maybe this is where, again, another idea of going in and adding, even with a colored pencil, you could add some thicker lines with something else. So it's not as definite. That's up to you. Now I'm going to do You Feel a slightly larger. Then I'll go back to thin. So I'm trying to go, you know, thin, thick, thin, thick. Try to have it have some order. And then I'm leaving that totally thin. Now matter is going to be big. And it could either be back to this thick one, or it could be like how we did the inspire, and I'm going to do it like we did the inspire. So the M is going to drop down low. And that R is going to drop down low. My T can connect through. And now I'll come back and make these thick. And you want to make sure give credit where credit is due, so I'm going to write Michelle Obama. And now I can go in and I could add detail. You could add little elements like little dots. This is where you can have fun just like you had fun creating your background. So continue to play with it there. So I hope you had fun today with our word art video. I hope you found your own style, or maybe one of the ones we went through you kind of tweaked for yourself, or maybe the very first style you loved. So I hope that you enjoyed yourself. I hope you found your own voice, your own rhythm in this word art. And maybe you decided that you just love these watercolor backgrounds and putting one word, and maybe you have a whole set of them now. Whatever it is, I hope you enjoyed, I hope you relaxed, and I hope you learned something new. Remember, drop comments below to let me know, to let the Winfield Public Library know what you'd like to see in the future. If we don't hear from you, we don't know. So drop comments below. Hit the like button, subscribe to the Winfield Public Library. That way you don't have to wait for a post. You know when they're posting. And please subscribe to my page, Choate Studio, also Marisa Choate. And so that way you can have way more art videos, and I hope you have fun. I will be doing some more videos for the Winfield Public Library later on in the summer, so look forward to those. Bye!